Show starts in 1 minute.
The moment our fellow geeks, dweebs, nerds, and other unfortunates have been fervently waiting for has finally arrived. It's time for TMI, Confessionals of the Nerd Kind. And now, your hosts, Jeff Nerf Herder Chandler, Jim Kaiju Baker, and Christina Yojimbo Henry. You can continue. And now, let's get on with the show. Here is TMI.
Hello.
We're in.
There we go.
We're recording. This is the climax of our trilogy.
Oh, really?
What were they thinking?
Can I just say, what were we thinking? Why we have now subjected ourselves to 3 horrible movies that we're just going
you
to
say this as if it's a bad thing. These are the best episodes to do. We can kvetch
I don't know.
for an hour.
I will say this last choice, 2.5 hours long.
Don't
Now,
even
Jeff,
get me started.
We'll get there.
you've never
All right, we'll get
you've
there.
never seen it before.
Nor have
So
I
you
yet.
didn't know what you were in for with that.
Oh my gosh. And it, like I said, normally my whole family watches all of the movies with me.
They were like,
But when I said I was going to watch our second feature today, my son got up, kissed my cheek, and said, "Your sacrifice will not be in vain," and left the
Nice.
room.
And he couldn't blame me this week. He could
No,
not
he
blame
only
Jeff.
had you to blame.
That's right, mother.
Right.
So apparently, I don't know if anybody's even aware of what we're talking about this week.
Yes.
Hopefully you've read the episode description before you
I
press
don't
play.
know, maybe someone for diehard, they don't care what we talk about. They just want to hear us.
Right, so it's our final episode of originals we love and remakes we do not love.
We love.
And
Oh,
it just
love
happened
and
to turn out that
loathe.
way, right? We
Yeah.
just did. I don't think that was premeditated.
No, I
It just
don't
happened
think
to
it
turn out
was,
that
yeah.
way. All 3.
Uh,
I think it just goes to show you how many movies are remade that just pale in comparison to the originals.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the feature today is Infernal Affairs 2002, Hong Kong cinema, instant classic in my opinion, starring Andy Lau and Tony Leung, 2 of the biggest stars, by the way, in Hong Kong cinema. And the Mahten Scorsese remake, The Depahted.
But he claims he didn't know it was a remake when he.
Well, it's
signed
right
on.
in the credits. It's front and center.
Well,
like, as soon
I
as
guess
the
when he
movie is-
agreed to film this, he was not aware that this was based on another movie.
That seems crazy considering that there's almost shot-for-shot copies of some of the scenes.
Yeah, I don't
from-
see how that
Yeah,
can be
no.
possible.
Right, because I mean, again, there was, that he didn't even watch it until afterwards because he didn't want to be in
That's
I
a
don't
lie.
believe that.
Yeah, that is
I don't
right.
believe that.
All right, well, we'll get there. So, yeah.
I
Here
had
we
not
go.
heard that, and I could tell you that just
That's not
based,
case.
if you watched the 2 films, you can tell that that's
Right.
a lie.
Oh, especially when you watch them
Now-
back to back, which is the way I did.
And I doubt he's lying. He probably never said that. It's
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Fake news, folks. We do have some news items if we want to get into that before we start talking about Infernal Affairs.
That's right.
See?
Infernal.
First out of my mouth, I said infernal.
Yeah, I've got a large F drawn by my computer.
But an F looks a lot like a T. So, anyways, here we go. Let's get some news. Jim, Splash Mountain is endangered.
I heard this.
Yeah,
heard
basically,
this.
Well, Disney World is set to reopen July 11th. And I
July.
think Disneyland is the following week, July 17th. But there is an online petition to rename Splash Mountain because it's based on Song of the South, which is a very stereotypical, racist movie that Disney wants to pretend never existed. And yet now we've had a ride. for a very long time.
For a very long time, since the late 80s.
A very long time.
And it was surprising then that they themed a ride around.
So here's what I didn't, in doing research for this news, I had no clue that when this movie was originally released in 1946, it was picketed.
Yeah,
people were protesting it back then. It's not like it suddenly became racist. It was always racist.
Because the excuse is, well, it's of its time. But
which we used as an argument last week.
Yeah.
And Christina shot us down.
Yeah, as you said, in its time, it was protested.
Right.
Yeah, I had no clue. I mean, I guess the protest slogans, this one I thought was a great, which is the Song of the South is slightly off key because Disney says it's wrong to be free.
Well, the source material is problematic to begin with because it's sort of implied in the film that these are like somehow traditional stories, like oral tradition type stories, like word of mouth, but that's not where they come from at all. It's actually a series of stories. It's written by a white writer. The source material is problematic to begin with if you've ever read it or even a little bit of it. It's
right.
Quite
I'm gonna go on a limb and say that there's probably a large amount of people who are listening right now who may not even know what this movie is. I mean, Disney's pulled it from. I mean, Disney wants to pretend it never existed. This is probably one of the very first movies I ever saw in the drive-in.
Mm-hmm. I remember seeing it, once or twice maybe when I was a kid until Disney decided. I think it was in the 80s.
Yeah, before the video boom and before the DVD boom, when Disney takes things out of the vault every 10 years or so and re-releases it on the format that's popular at the time, they used to re-release it in the theaters maybe every 5 or 10 years. And the last theatrical release of Song of the South was 85.
Oh wow, that late.
And that's when I saw it. Was during its theatrical release. I
mean, everybody knows the zippity doo dah, zippity. Even that right there is kind of, Uncle Remus, Brer Rabbit, Brer Bear.
It depicts slavery as a warm and cozy,
but
happy
I think,
thing.
But I think part of, well, not to defend it, but it takes place in like after the Emancipation Proclamation. And yet, you're right. All these slaves, make it look like they're just happy to work for these white plantation owners.
But yeah, the news story here is that Splash Mountain is based on Song of the South. Not the controversial aspects of it, I might add, but the animated portions from the movie.
I mean, it's still using the characters. Yeah. It's still using the songs and the locations. So even if you don't know, we're Brer Rabbit and Brer Bear. But anyways, but they want it to be rebranded into a Princess and the Frog.
That would be awesome.
Which
it makes sense to do it because it is
Disney's first Black princess.
Mm-hmm. And it's a great.
It's in the South. It's still
Right, and it's a great movie.
Yes.
By the way,
Tiana, was that her name?
Tiana.
Tiana. Yeah. Highly underrated, by the way.
And it does lend itself for a water-themed ride.
Right.
That movie. So would make sense if they were to, but it would be a long time that ride would be offline.
But it's not unusual for Disney to like rebrand stuff.
Oh no, not at all. I mean, what was it? We've talked 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, where they took away Nautilus and it's Ariel's Grotto.
Right. Yes, right. And they did the same with the Frozen ride in Norway.
Right. The Maelstrom.
The Maelstrom was just kind of given an overlay. They didn't change the ride vehicles. They didn't change the track.
Right. They just
changed everything that was around it.
Little branding.
So they could do the same with Splash Mountain.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Plus, like any opportunity to hear Keith David again. I love him in Princess and the Frog.
Yeah. All right. So there you go. We'll have to just keep an eye on this and see how it plays out. If Bob Iger, Bob Iger's no longer in charge, right?
Well, I think
sort of is.
Like as a dotted line, he is.
Yeah. But he did come out last year and just said it's that the movie is just not appropriate in today's world. So even more reason right now.
Mm-hmm.
Stick to your
but
guns,
it's in several theme parks. They would have to do it everywhere.
Well, right. Tokyo. It's in the California one. It's obviously in Florida.
So. I mean, I think the priority would be to fix it in the U.S. Because it's set in the U.S. It
says a little more. Yeah.
Deals with U.S. history. I think that it's important to fix it here. and then they could, fix it abroad.
And the argument to change it, especially for Disneyland in California, is very solid because it is literally right next door in Disneyland to the Haunted Mansion, which is part of New Orleans Square.
Oh, which should be.
Oh,
Yeah. So
that's
it
almost
just
a no-brainer.
take it out
That's
of Critter
probably,
Country, which is the land that it's in right now, in Disneyland,
and just encapsulate
and make it part of
New
New
Orleans.
Orleans Square.
I like it. Now I'm hungry for some beignets.
And then they could have a Tiana's Place, right? Because that's her name
That's
for
true.
restaurant.
That's the name of her restaurant at the end. Yeah, as long as they serve frog legs, I'm in.
They won't serve frogs.
Oh, you're pretty sure about that? You're pretty
They'll
sure?
serve some approximation, and it won't really be frogs.
Alligator bites?
Yeah.
No, nothing. So, all right, moving on. Evil Dead 4. Do we even know that this was a thing?
4?
Evil Dead 4 is a go.
Do you mean the remake or a sequel to the remake?
It's a sequel. No, this is a sequel. So basically, Bruce Campbell has confirmed that there is a 4th entry. It is titled Evil Dead Now. Sam Raimi is not directing it, but he has handpicked a director whose name is Lee Cronin. He's got like one movie under his belt, which came out last year, called The Hole in the Ground. I am not familiar with this movie, so I don't know what his creds are. But here's the thing, which is Campbell has basically acknowledged that he will not be in it.
But I read something to the effect that this is not the part 4, the continuation from Army of Darkness. This is the sequel to the remake.
Right, the one that was made a few years ago.
That had
but
no
that was
Bruce
only
Campbell involvement.
The fact that he's part of the news article implies to me that.
Well, I think he's a producer of it. Campbell, I think, produced, if I'm not mistaken, the remake.
I never saw that. I mean, but he had the TV show, Ash vs. Evil, right?
Yeah, Ash
which
vs. Evil
continued.
Dead. I think so. This is. I mean, I can appreciate that somebody wants to take a franchise that they like and they want to bring something new to it. But I don't know. I think for a lot of Evil Dead fans, like, Evil Dead is Ash.
Right.
And it's just not Evil Dead without him, which is why the TV show was probably more popular than the remake of the film. I mean, I'm always willing to give something a chance, but
yeah. Well, I'll give you. Here's his quote, which is, from this point forward, they kind of have to stand on their own, which is fine and liberating. You could have different heroes, different heroines in this case. So right off the bat, you're implying that it's going to be female driven. This one's going to be a little more dynamic. We just want to keep the series current. And the mantra really is that our heroes and heroines are just regular people. And that's what we're going to continue. It sounds like it's probably just going to be another Evil Dead with a female lead. And we'll see where it goes.
Yeah.
So those are my only 2 news articles this week, unless you have anything to add.
No. Let's get into it.
Let's go.
I'm
Let's
very
go.
much looking forward to talking about this now, and hoping Christina can clarify some questions I had about
you have
Infernal
questions?
Affairs. Yes.
I will do my best.
Okay.
Yeah.
So bring us in, please.
All right. So the plot of Infernal Affairs, pretty straightforward. A triad boss named Sam has a bunch of young kids who are in his gang who have clean records, and he decides to send some of them to the police academy as cadets at a very young age, basically to act as moles for his organization from the inside of the police. And around the same time, a couple of commanders just have the same bright idea that they're going to take a very young police officer and pretend to expel him from cadet school and plant him as an undercover cop. And before we really get going into it, I should point out that at the beginning of the movie, there's a quote from one of the Buddhist sutras talking about the continuous hell, which the hell of continuous suffering. This is the lowest of the 18 hells in Buddhism. And it's the worst one because you will suffer continuously. There's no relief from your suffering.
Isn't that like with every? Shouldn't that be with every level?
No. There's degrees. Because
this one's extra
the first
special,
one is
Jim.
only about an hour. I got an hour of suffering and then I'm out.
Yeah.
Because in Buddhism, you're always striving for your next best life. So the idea is that things will improve as you improve. But it's actually really important overall, I think, to the themes of the movie, especially when we get to the end, this idea of continuous suffering. Yan is played by Tony Leung, and Lau, played by Andy Lau. Lau is the gang mole inside the police. Yan is the police officer who is pretending to be a gangster. And at the beginning of the film, we see them very young, and then it very quickly jumps ahead to 10 years later, and the two of them are still in their sort of deep cover role.
10 years? That's substantial.
Yeah. Now, this is where I got a little bit lost in the beginning.
Oh, I got very lost. Thank you.
They have two, they have a younger actors playing them as younger kids. And then when they jump, it was like, okay, who was who? But because they're doing flashbacks as well.
Right.
Yeah. This is, once again, I have to say, Christina just continues to choose movies that forced me to go back and rewatch them after the first time. Because, I was confused as hell up front. And part of my confusion had to do with the subtitles. Because some of this dialogue is so rat-a-tat. And maybe it's just I'm slow reader. I don't know. But there were moments
my subtitles disappeared quickly.
Somebody would say hello, and it would linger on screen for 20 seconds. And then somebody would respond with 4 sentences, and it would flash and come and go. And it didn't always correlate. Like sometimes a character would say something, and it didn't. Like there's a point where you're like, wait, who just said that? It's a weird. I had a really hard time up front, but I did get into it, and I wrote it out.
Now, first question, right off the bat.
Yeah.
Okay, Boss Sam.
Yeah.
He is putting all these young kids through the police academy for the express purpose of being his moles. Yen was not one of these kids. He was somebody that was in the police academy and was expelled, but like kind of as a cover.
Right, expelled as a cover, exactly.
So he was very publicly expelled in front of all the other, and then he has to walk away. And then there's that flashback where he's walking away, and Lau is looking at him walking away. So
because the flashbacks are nice because it does kind of fill you in, and sometimes it like holds your hand a little bit too much, but I needed that.
Yeah. Well, I love that scene at the beginning and how it's echoed again at the end.
Yes, at the end,
Because Yen is leaving, right? He's the police officer who has been publicly expelled, so that they can give him the cover so he can go be a gangster. Right. And Lau is a gangster, and he doesn't want to be in the academy. And the commander says, "Who wants to be expelled like ex-cadet Yan?" And he looks up and he says, "I do." Lau says, "I do." And then it's echoed again at the end of the story in such, I think, such a moving way. I think at the end of the film.
But then they meet each other in the stereo shop, right?
And I love this scene because I mean, one of the unfortunate things about this movie is that the two of them don't have more scenes together.
Right.
Because when they're together, I just feel like it's magic. Right. And it's such a little thing. They don't know. They have no idea who the other person is or even what their roles in life are.
Well, that's just it. And you don't realize as an audience member what a big, this scene, has a lot of prominence that carries over, but you don't, you're almost thinking it's like a throwaway thing.
You don't know it unless you watched it again. Then it
correct. That's
more.
what I'm saying. Where it's one of those movies where you get to the end and you're like, they're laying it all out for you.
This is where my first question was I didn't know if these guys knew each other already because they were acting kind of familiar in the record store. That's why I thought maybe Yen was one of the phony cadets, but apparently he was not.
Yep.
Yeah, and it's such a beautiful scene because they're just messing around with the stereo speakers, trying to figure out how to get the best sound out of them, and the two of them are sitting together, and I don't know, it's just every time they're together in the movie, I feel like this kind of electricity. You just wish that they had more scenes together.
Right. And the one thing that you realize is that they really are two sides of the same coin. And the cat and mouse throughout this is very intense. The music, the soundtrack is very driving. Cinematically, there's some beautiful shots. But again, you don't realize the relevance of that stereo scene until later in the movie.
Yeah.
And so it's, they're hitting these beats. And like I said, early on, I'm just kind of like, oh, I can't even keep up with the dialogue. I can't keep up with, who is who.
Because Jeff, you were saying that seemed to be a throwaway scene for an audience member that's never seen this before.
Right,
like,
which
the
was
stereo
me.
thing.
Yeah.
But at the end, it ties in. But
That's what I'm saying.
How do these guys
Yeah.
remember that this was the guy from the stereo shop in the beginning? When Lau's girlfriend, as the stereo guy was over, he wanted to tune up our system.
Yeah.
He realized that he knew that it was the guy from the stereo shop.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what,
yeah, and one of the things I love about this movie, and I think it does such a good job of exploring this question and showing the complexities of both characters, is when you've been doing something for 10 years, are you who you think you are on the inside, or are you the results of your actions? Because Yan says to the commander, he says to SP Wong, I can't keep my hands clean. I'm supposed to be a gangster.
Right.
Yeah. And then he asks the psychiatrist, do you think I'm a good guy or a bad guy? Because he probably doesn't know.
But even like, go back to, his girlfriend who's writing the story.
Lau's his fiance Mary.
Yeah, because she's basically, struggling with the same thing. Is he a good guy or is he not a good guy?
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, I can't answer that. I can't answer that. He's like, but the story's about you. You just don't see it.
And Lau is invested in his role, because you see that scene at the beginning when he goes in and he pretends to be the lawyer for the gangster, right? And then he comes out with this information and he gives the phone to his team. He's like, yep, here we go. Here's the phone number of their hideout. Like, let's do this and that. And he is like, he seems genuinely excited to like make the bust. Right.
Even though, he's kind of going against his own people.
I mean, well, it's not a gang that's not related to his gang, right?
Right. Yeah.
So, but he feels invested in the work
role,
that he's doing.
The role that he's playing.
So is he a good guy? Is like the sum of everything he's done, does it weigh more on the side of good than it does of bad?
And the scenes that he has on the phone with Boss Sam, he's not exactly enthusiastic.
Right.
So it seems like he's questioning his life and his role in this gang.
And I think that you can sort of start feeling these two actors are so great. I think they're just amazing. And I think you can feel, their reluctance on the part of Lau to continue doing this. And obviously, like, Yan feels like if he doesn't get out soon, he's not going to know anymore.
Right.
If he's a good guy, because he's been doing bad things for so long. Yeah. And I love the subtlety of the Morse code.
Oh, brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. And the build up and the tension in this movie is just I can't it really is, like, it sucks you in. Mm-hmm. And again, the music, and there's this beautiful standoff in the movie theater where they kind of come across each other, and it's just, you're just like, you're just like, it really was amazing. You're like, wow.
It should be noted that part of that suspense is driven by the fact that Superintendent Wong is the only one that knows Yan's identity. So he's his only link to the police department. Mm-hmm. The only one that knows that he's not actually a gangster. Really the whole scene where he's got to meet him on the rooftop to tell him that he's going nuts and that he wants to get out of this. Everybody converges on the rooftop at once. That scene is so harrowing, and I was so happy that I didn't really remember the last time I'd seen The Departed, because the scene in The Departed is like shot for shot.
Yes.
Yeah.
Based on this scene here. I haven't seen The Departed since 2006, so I had no memory of it. So this was really tense, not remembering how it plays out.
Yes.
And it was actually surprising when he is thrown off the roof.
It's a nail biter, and it's shocking because Wong and Sam have had like a very public standoff, right, in the police station earlier on, right, basically saying like, I know that you put a card in my pocket, and you know that I put a card in your pocket, and whoever finds out, is the one who will win.
Right.
will be the one who does
And that
die.
scene was amazing, that standoff in the police station. And that was not replicated in The Departed. And I have no idea why they wouldn't, because that's probably the most memorable scene for me in this.
At an extra hour added on, you think that they would have put that scene
And how
in there.
and how Boss Sam like gets mad and he sweeps
And
the food off the table.
that's another point though, which this movie's only like an hour and a half long.
I know, it's in and out, bam, bam.
It's very,
right?
but it's very terse. It's very, you get in, and again, they throw a lot of information up front, and for somebody who hasn't seen it, Jim and I are both like, wait, but we have questions. But by the end of the movie, you start to unravel it, and you're like, all right. And again, it forces you to be like, all right, I need to go back and rewatch that.
And I think though you just get so invested in the power struggle, and also again sort of in the sort of individual struggle that's going on within Lau and Yan,
Right.
And I think for Yan, obviously one of the things that really illustrates everything that he lost is when he runs into his ex-girlfriend.
Who lies about the age of the kid.
Who lies about the age of the daughter, and I think if you put it all together, it's clearly his daughter.
His child, yep.
But she obviously thought he was like a scumbag or a criminal, and she left him.
Yep.
So, like, this moment, tiny moment, represents this huge amount of his life that he's lost.
That he's thrown away in pursuit of this job, yeah.
So I mean, it's sad in so many ways, and then,
again, that's kind of a throwaway scene, but yeah, it plays in significantly with his character and why he's like, you know what?
Now, this was one of the things that occurred to me. That scene where he runs into the old girlfriend, he's just leaving his cronies behind. Like he turns the corner. I think he actually sees her when he's still hanging with these guys. Yeah. And it brings the question: is okay, if you're a rat inside this organization, how do you explain where you go during the day? You'd think that Boss Sam would keep very close tabs on everybody. And he goes to the psychiatrist. In The Departed, the reason that DiCaprio goes to the psychiatrist is because it's part of his probation. But you don't really have that story, that plot point.
No, and as a matter of fact, there's that one scene where they're setting up for a big attack, and he's like, I gotta go get a massage, and nobody questions it.
So is he going to the psychiatrist because he's going nuts and it's like a police psychiatrist? Or
Wong actually says that he has to go to a psychiatrist early, like in the first scene in the movie when he gives him the recording devices and the watch for his birthday.
Yes.
Yeah, he says,
okay,
I think you need to see a psychiatrist.
Right.
Because he said he'd had like 3 incidents where he'd beaten somebody up or something, and basically that he can't control his anger. And
he went full Mel Gibson on him.
Right. But at that point, Yen is like, well, I'm undercover. If you didn't realize this,
right.
I can't be going places like this.
Yeah. And apparently they don't have caller ID in 2002, because there's a point where after poor Wong gets thrown out the window, Lau decides to pick up the phone and say, I wonder who he called last.
Well, of course, it's got to be an unmarked number, right?
I know, but
caller ID on that.
But wouldn't Yan like see this and be like, oh, it says my contact? I don't know.
He knows the number is coming from Wong's phone. And he knows that Wong is dead. And I love that scene where they each pick up and they're just like breathing into the phone.
No, it's but again, this is the tension, right? Because now it's like it's a full on cat and mouse, and he's like, I'm onto you and I know you're onto me, kind of a thing. But again, at the same time, but you're right, that even like the Morse code stuff was, and again, that's all dismissed in The Departed.
Yeah, well, in the Morse code, I love the subtlety of it, because it can be passed off as just a nervous tick if you're not paying attention, right? Like it's just tapping.
You see it, and it takes him a bit to realize what's going on, because they know that there's a mole, and they're trying to figure it. Yes.
And then like there's this brief moment where you think everyone's going to be a hero. Right, that Yan and Lau are teaming up to capture Sam, right?
Yeah,
like Yan sending him the Morse code. Lau is, takes down Sam in the warehouse, and you're like, yes, he's chosen. He's going to be a good guy now. And you think Lau's not going to be caught, that they'll both be heroes. But then when Yan finally comes in and reveals himself to be the mole, and he sees the envelope
like, it's you. Right.
And then I think for Yan, this is a defining moment where he says to himself that he has to take down this guy because otherwise he's not a cop. You know.
Right. Now it's
Right. Yeah. Am I going to be complicit in this or not?
Yeah. And I thought it was genius because Lau's like, all right, what's your password for your file? Let's get in there. And he goes, his password was undercover.
Morse code. Morse code for undercover.
Yeah, Morse code for undercover.
So, I was so relieved because when he actually writes the symbol for bodyguard and he crosses it out and writes it again, I'm like, did I miss something? Does this mean something that I'm not picking up on?
Yeah.
And then when he finally sees an envelope, that's what it meant. I'm not stupid after all.
Right.
But like I said, where they hold your hand, where they actually go back and they show you that flashback of him writing it, crossing it out.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like, just for you, Jim and Jeff, here's the significance.
This is why
this
means something. Yeah.
But I think it's nice because they don't put anything in the movie at the beginning that doesn't play out again at the end.
Correct. Yes.
Nothing
Again,
that's planted that
yep.
doesn't come to
right.
fruit.
There's no like do's and machina. There's no like crazy thing that comes out of left field at the end that somehow justifies what they're doing. You're right. You go back and you watch this, and it all makes sense.
Yeah. And at the end, let's talk about the ending. The second rooftop conversation.
So how did he not see him coming though? He's completely surrounded by glass buildings.
Well,
and somehow he gets a drop on him.
There's the stairwell thing right on the roof.
This is my only quibble. Give it to me.
It's like how the zombie in The Walking Dead can always sneak up on
him. Yeah.
This is a great scene too because even before Yan gets there, Lau, again, like just the symbology, he sees his distorted reflection in the glass of the building across, like he sees,
he's warped.
His mirror. Even though Yan is threatening him, he's like, I want to talk to you. Like, I've chosen. I'm going to be good. Like, I'm not going to, be that guy anymore. And then the other officer shows up, and the devastating, absolutely devastating scene where you find out the other officer is also one of Sam's moles. He shoots Yan in the elevator, and it's so
point blank.
So sudden, and it's so violent.
Because I think out of the two of them, you really are invested in him more so than Lau.
I felt that way as well.
Yeah, and you're like,
and it plays out that way in The Departed, just because the character of Sullivan is just annoying. So they make him a bad guy in The Departed,
right?
And he's
where Lau is more redeemable.
Yeah.
Right, like Lau, like I think you can feel his conflict, like you feel his complexity. I think a lot more. He makes this decision, like the other officer says, I got rid of all of Sam's tapes, like the recordings that would have implicated Lau, and I'm your guy now. And Lau makes this decision to kill him.
Yeah.
I think, and I like to think, that he makes this decision not to protect himself, but to sort of cut off that part of his past and say, like, I'm a police officer now. Like, I'm no longer going to be a gangster.
But it does conveniently wrap things up.
His ass.
But it does.
Yeah,
but he's covering his ass so that he can be a good guy. I mean, that's
because this all plays out after he comes back to the girlfriend's house and the stereo's all set up or whatever.
And how does that play out? That relationship?
She's already right, because she knows he left them the CD with the message on it.
Right. She knows.
And she's kind of right. She knows all that's going on, and then she's like, "You want some breakfast? You want some iced tea?" And I'm like, "You're insane."
But
iced
if you
tea
think
with
about
breakfast?
it, he's still kind of complicit. He's still covering himself up. He's denying his past, yes, but he's continuing on. He's not turning himself in, which would be the right thing to do.
Right, but this is where the theme of the continuous hell comes back, right? Because at the end of the movie, they have the flashback to the scene at the beginning where Lau is the cadet and Yan is the ex-cadet leaving the school, and you see them both for a moment as their child selves and then as adults. Right, and he sees Yan as an adult turn and look back at him, and again you hear the commander's voice say, "Who wants to be like ex-cadet Yan?" And Lau looks at him and says, I do. He would rather be dead because to make himself good, quote unquote good, he's built his life on this foundation of lies and death. And now he has to live with that. That is his continuous hell. That is his continuous suffering. So even if he's good, everything that he's done has been built on this deception. And I just think that makes the end of the movie so powerful.
Yeah.
So much more powerful. We'll get into The Departed, but so much more powerful because the idea that you have to live with your choices, I think, is much worse than like sort of the easy out of a death.
Now, Christina, just talking about the end, I read getting into this that there's sequels.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to bring up. How does that play into this?
Yeah, everybody's dead.
There's a trilogy,
at the end.
Right? There's a trilogy.
So there's the second film is a prequel about them when they're young, and then the third film like goes on and does these kind of flashbacks between the past and the present, so that they can have Andy Lau and Tony Leung again. But I never actually saw the third one because for me, the end, I love the end of this movie. Right. I love where it ends emotionally. So like the other films don't really like feature for me, and they were significantly like not as successful.
Now, what I saw on Amazon, there's a voiceover at the very end during I think it's during the funeral scene where it says 6 months later, the psychiatrist turns in Inspector Lau. So that wasn't like tacked on because I read somewhere in some markets they had a different ending where everything got wrapped up nicely. So I was wondering, is that supposed to be there, that voiceover, or no?
Or is that like the introduction to
the DVD that I have does not have that ending. And I did read that ending was for in some certain markets because some places do not want the bad guy to not be punished.
Because that took away from it. I'm like, that doesn't make sense. Why would they have that? It's like the ending
and then
of
Santa
American
came down and everybody
it's the
was
ending
happy.
of American Graffiti where it tells you like 2 years later he became this, but now knowing afterwards that maybe that wasn't supposed to be there, that makes a lot more sense.
Yeah, I mean, because the whole thing, like I said, the significance of the quote from the sutra at the beginning, it plays back in at the end. It's so important, this idea of the continuous hell, and it's like he will continually suffer. He has to stay there and, like I said, sort of live with his choices, live with his consequences. And to me, it's so much more powerful than the idea of like the bad guy just getting caught. Again, are you your actions or are you who you think you are inside? When he's driving to the final confrontation, he's calling his fiancée and saying, I know who I am now. I've chosen to be good. But he's going to a place where he's going to potentially face the consequences of his actions, and he knows that.
And that really isn't explored very much in The Departed. It's where DiCaprio's character is just going crazy because he's living this double life, but he's not questioning whether or not he's a good, he's a good guy throughout. And the Damon's character is just a jerk throughout. So there's no conflict there.
No.
And I think that too, like one of the things that lends a lot of gravity to their situations is that they've both been doing this for a decade, right? Whereas in The Departed, it's significantly less
couple of years,
time.
Not a year or so. Yeah.
So to me, it just doesn't have the same impact. But like this is one of my favorite movies. I was so excited to have a chance to get you guys to watch this.
I really enjoyed
what I
it.
didn't realize? I thought that like Andy Lau, I already know he's a Renaissance man, but I was thinking, Andrew Lau, he's
I was going to ask the same thing.
But it's not the same guy. It's not the same guy.
No.
But I also like the fact that a lot of these characters, they just use the actors' last names. So in a large, so it's just like, all right, dude. But yeah, Andrew Lau, I'm like, wow, this guy does it all.
No.
I'm like, that's not him. I looked IMDb. I'm like, that's not him at all. He didn't age well. That's not him.
Although, did you notice that Andy Lau and Tony Leung sing the song at the end of the?
That I did not pick up.
Yeah, they both sing
that's great.
the song at the end of the credits. Yeah. Well, I think I mentioned when we did Detective D that Andy Lau is like a countapaht.
That he is a pop star.
Yep. Yeah, he's a huge star. And I mean, both of them are massive stars in Hong Kong. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Tony Leung and other things, but like he's basically been Wong Kar-wai's leading man for like 20 years. He was in Chungking Express and Happy Together and In the Mood for Love, which is one of my 5 buckets. And he's in Hero, if you guys have seen that.
I have seen Hero.
Yeah.
It's been a while.
He's in a ton of movies. He's in Hard Boiled, where he also plays the undercover cop.
You know what? I read a very cool fact that this was inspired by Face Off.
Is this John Woo film?
John Woo, yeah. Lau was looking at something that was like Face Off.
This is
more
a
realistic.
Much more I was gonna say this is a much more intellectual, intelligent. I mean, Face Off is fun. That's not poo-poo it because it is just it's cotton candy. You just sit back and you eat your sugar.
But this is, I love like so many things about this, like the pacing and just like it just kind of gets you in there and like it moves forward in like a really streamlined way. Like there's no fat, and yet I said, everything that you're seeing is comes to fruition. Yep. Like there's nothing in there that's wasted. It's superfluous. Such a good movie. Yeah, and again, I go back to the cinematography, but even like the editing, the cuts, the just fast editing cuts, and the soundtrack really just adds so much to this.
You see, the only thing I didn't like was the soundtrack, actually.
Really? I thought it was very...
Because I thought it was like a hard copy Law and Order kind of soundtracky kind of a thing. And then the fact when Wong gets killed, when he's thrown, all that orchestral as they're going, the camera's going around him. That I thought that was a little overwrought, but that was the only thing I found. One thing that kept recurring to me was whenever they would show in a subtitle, and whenever Sam would talk, and it would say "Boss Sam." Of course, I'm thinking of Boss Nass from episode 1.
Although, if you watch a lot of Hong Kong cinema, like you will have seen all of these actors before, like Eric Tsang, who plays Sam, Anthony Wong, who plays Wong. These are like really well-known character actors in Hong Kong cinema.
So, and also this begs the question, and I was thinking that maybe the sequels go here. He had several kids there, Boss Sam in the beginning. So you see another one who comes back at the end who ends up killing Yen. Who are the other kids? What are their roles in the police department?
Yeah, just waiting in the wings.
But for me, I don't necessarily need a sequel. I like where it ends, and I'm okay not knowing whatever they speculated after that. Like I just like where this ends.
No, it's a great, just like you said, in and out. It's a beautiful movie. Yeah.
Is this a 5 bucket for you?
It's really close. I was going to say it's like 4 3/4. There's very little that I dislike about this film. Maybe I should say 5 buckets. Maybe I should not even kid myself.
I give it a solid 4. I really liked it.
Yeah.
Once I liked it. Once I understood it.
and my enjoyment of it increased after I watched The Departed. So
like I said, you can't watch the two of these together because
I would give it just shy of 4. I would say 3 3/4. I would go.
Still pretty solid for you.
Yeah.
And it's such a rewatchable movie. I can't tell you how many times I've
because now you're starting to pick up on stuff. Like you said, there's really nothing in here. There's no fat. So everything you're seeing is there for a reason. And once you go back and rewatch it, now you start picking up on all these little cues. Very well done.
Yeah, it's just such a good movie, and I'm just like so super happy that I've had the opportunity now to actually get you guys to watch 2 Andy Lau movies in the last 3 months.
That's true. Again, an awful lot of subtitles going on here.
Okay, so now that we've gushed,
now we're gonna flush.
It's time. That was better than what I was gonna say. So I'll keep that.
And then you flush.
But before we do that, let's go to the concession stand.
I hope you have a bowl of lobster chowder.
Show starts in 5 minutes. Yum, yum. It's time for a tasty and refreshing snack. promise to satisfy your hunger, your thirst, your sweet tooth. So visit our refreshment center now. Let's go.
Okay, we're back.
We have to do this entire review using a Boston accent.
No,
The Depahted
please.
was overkill.
That's like fingers on the chalkboard by the end of this week.
We're gonna alienate all of our New Englanders. Well, they say it about 10 times in this movie.
They do, yeah.
Yeah.
The Depahted.
The Depahted. So hold on again. Tell me who's the Depahted?
And you know what's funny is when I looked this up on Wikipedia to get some facts on it, the first sentence in the Wikipedia listing, this film takes place in Boston. Really?
Bahston Harbor.
Never would have guessed.
And yet somehow Jack Nicholson's character is devoid of a Boston accent or an Irish accent.
Yeah, he's playing the Joker from Batman. That's what he's playing here.
Jack Nicholson has only played Jack Nicholson for like 20 years.
Yeah, I was going to say, yeah.
This is why Stephen King does not like the film version of The Shining.
Because he was halfway crazy to begin with.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're not even a minute in, and this guy's like, there's friggin' a half dozen racial slurs in the potty mouth just pouring out of Jack's face. It's crazy.
Oh my gosh.
It is such, so go back to, I'm sorry, I don't mean to step on your toes, but you go back to Infernal Affairs, and it's really kind of bloodless. And there's no sex. There is a scene where he stays the night in the girlfriend's house. There's nothing that implies that there's anything really going on except for the fact that he wakes up the next morning. It's just, I don't want to say it's sanitized, but right off the bat, this is just down in the gutter. And I get it that it probably is a little more true to fact to where Boston was and the seedy underbelly. But right from the get-go, it left me with a bad taste in my mouth. And it's not because I don't like Scorsese. I was willing to give this a shot. But like I said, you watch these two movies back to back, and they are, even though there's so many plot points that just, you're like, oh, here we go. That's going to, it is a completely different movie.
It's, it's funny that you bring up the language, because I do think it matters, because it's not like there's not swearing in Scorsese's movies normally.
Right.
But like this movie, I'm really a big fan of Scorsese's early work. I really love Raging Bull, especially, which I think is incredibly powerful. But I'm not a fan of what you might call late Scorsese. Basically, from Goodfellas forward, with the exception of Hugo, which I do enjoy. And this movie has the same quality that I really, really hate about Goodfellas, which is like there's a lot of guys talking just to hear themselves talk, and like the predominance of like the swearing, like racial epithets. Right. It's like, to me, it's like a Tarantino movie crossed with a David Mamet play. Is probably his best known work on film is Glengarry Glen Ross,
which I've seen several times.
The dialogue is just brilliant.
It's like it wants to be a Mamet play crossed with a Tarantino movie, and these guys are just talking and talking and talking, and nobody stops talking, and everybody's talking all the freaking time.
I know. Everybody needs to get their 2 cents in. Every scene.
Correct. Yeah.
Except for Martin Sheen. I think Martin Sheen is the only one that has any restraint in this movie.
Mark Wahlberg. I don't know what he was doing in this, but I enjoyed it.
He was the worst in terms of profanity.
But that was why I loved it so much, because he was just, I don't know.
When him and Alec Baldwin are on the screen together, it's just like it's these two lugs going at it.
But Matt Damon, I thought, really killed it in this as well.
But there's actually a scene where Jack Nicholson's girlfriend sits up from the couch and she says, "Don't you guys ever effing shut up?" And I was like, "Preach it, sister." Yeah. Preach.
You know what was really disturbing to me about his girlfriend is that I was convinced until the end, when he actually says her name at some point, that was the girl that he was hitting on at the soda shop.
That's what I thought too.
Oh yeah.
No, it's too, because that girl's name was Carmen and her name was something else. The girl
and that was a creepy scene right off the bat.
Super creepy.
Yeah. Well, when we're introduced to him, and when he actually meets the kid who is Matt Damon.
Who is Sullivan, is Colin Sullivan. And this is what he takes away watching Nicholson's character do this, like strong arm this guy and then hit on his daughter. And then suddenly he's a father figure to him. He's like,
Right.
oh,
Okay.
I want to be
Yeah.
that guy. And from
right.
that point on, I hated Damon's character.
And he doesn't make any attempt to make the character likable. You know, there's like, he's just abrasive.
Oh
And-
yeah, right. I mean, when you first meet him at the rugby match, and he's yelling at the fire department because it just
But honestly, the biggest offense of this movie, first of all, is the extra hour.
ridiculous.
And it doesn't add, it literally sucks the suspense out of it.
Now, from what I understood is that they were trying to pull in, according to Lau, from what I read, they were pulling in some plot points from the sequels of Infernal Affairs and put them into Depahted. And
so they're trying to jam 3 movies into this.
Well, not exactly, but I think that they were using, and I've never seen the sequels to Infernal Affairs, so I don't know if this is true or not, but somebody that worked on Infernal Affairs said that it seemed like they were trying to bring in plot points from all 3 movies, and they came out with this monster in the back end.
See, I thought I thought it was interesting, and I liked up front, like when you first see DiCaprio's character come in, and he's being interviewed by Sheen and Damon, and they're really kind of, do you want to be a cop or do you want to pretend to be a cop? And I thought that was really interesting because they were really digging deep into like what's kind of motivating this kid. But I'm going to be honest with you, I stopped watching this movie a half an hour in.
I definitely
I did not finish watching this, knowing that there was another
a half
2
an hour
hours.
in.
A half an hour in. I had a very limited window because we have other movies to get to, and I pulled a mic and I cut the cord
of
because
the
I'm
movies
like,
that you
here's
could
all
have.
the main characters. Here's all the characters. So if it plays out the way it did in Infernal Affairs, this guy's gonna fall and this guy's gonna get. So it did. Like, you know, Christina said up front, which is there's no tension whatsoever, and you have no invested interest in either one of these characters.
Right. So now, but Jeff, now you can't talk about the boots on the moon scene with Mark Wahlberg at the very end.
No, I guess I can't.
There's so many scenes that are literally exactly exact copies, like from.
Well, like you said, there's the rooftop scene. The rooftop scene is
the rooftop. The scene where he calls him on the phone.
Right.
There's a bunch of the scene where the 2 guys are standing outside the bar talking about how you recognize a cop.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. And of course the envelope scene where he writes the word citizens rather than bodyguard.
Bodyguard.
And which is what the tell at the end when DiCaprio knows it's Damon.
But basically, I know that this is a beloved movie. And if you go on IMDb, there's a fair amount of. But for every review where they're like, "This is the greatest movie ever. You need to see this." It won Academy Awards.
It won Best Picture.
Including Best Picture. But if you've never seen Infernal Affairs, that's the argument. Which is, if you go back to the source material, you're going to realize how faulty this thing really is. If you don't know, but if you're unaware, you just take it for what you take it for the animal that it is and what Scorsese.
And even when this won Best Picture around the time, it was said that it was really like a career award rather than an award for this film.
So they were rewarding him more for like his body of work. He missed out last year on whatever, so let's give it to him this year, kind of a thing, which just legitimizes the award altogether for me.
I think that you can look at a lot of the Best Picture winners and say, there's definitely been some questionable choices.
Yeah.
I don't want to go off on a rant on an old grudge, but there's absolutely no reason why Crash should have won Best Picture. Or
Marissa Tomei walking away with Best Actress.
Oh no, she's good in that movie.
She is good in that movie, but
I think that actually. I think I actually like that she won because I feel like comic performances don't often get recognized, but that's another thing. This movie's frustrating on a lot of levels. It could be at least a half an hour shorter. There's nothing, you get nothing extra, I think, out of the scenes that they put in. There's no suspense. I think it's super distasteful that they have based this movie on a Hong Kong cinema movie, and the scene in which they encounter the Chinese mob is so offensive.
And when Nicholson repeats, "in this country," and it almost seems like a slap in the face to Infernal Affairs.
It
like
does.
him saying that.
Wow.
Like,
It
in this
does.
country, we make The Departed.
Right.
And you know, there's just so many, and I normally I would say I'm like Leonardo DiCaprio's least fan. I'm just not really a fan of his. He's okay in this.
Oh,
Yeah,
his eyebrows
I
were working
liked him.
overtime, right?
Probably the script is really focusing on him as the good guy. There's no ambiguity between him and Damon. Damon is bad, DiCaprio is good. So because, you're conditioned to like DiCaprio because he's acting on behalf of the audience, he wants you to be with him, and I liked him.
But I dislike that his character basically seems like he's hysterical all the time. He always seems like he's panicking. It's
He's
like
unhinged, yeah.
It's like contrasts him to like the way Tony Leung plays Yan, where he's
Right.
so
Very
collected.
Put together, yeah.
Where he never acts out, or like he conveys his emotions in such a subtle way. It's like what I feel like to a very large extent is that the plot of Infernal Affairs is dumbed down for an American audience who does not like complexity in characters. It's like, this is clearly the bad guy,
And
this is clearly the good
right.
guy.
Yeah.
And
Is that why we were
everybody-
confused, Jim? We've been conditioned.
We've been conditioned. Yeah,
We
we
have
can't
been
think
conditioned.
in these ambiguous
Apparently,
terms.
I blame the American Film Society.
the bad guy gets punished. I mean, you're glad to see Damon's character get killed at the end because he's such an ass. But again, it sort of takes away that ambiguity, that idea that he would suffer as a consequence of his actions and all that. But that's not
Right.
really played into this film.
And they don't adhere to the Infernal Affairs ending, correct? It is
No.
slightly, right. Yeah.
No, Matt Damon's character is shot by Mark
Right.
Wahlberg's character at the
Yeah,
end.
it's almost like them having to tack another ending on Infernal Affairs for other countries. They've done that here for the main version of The Departed because you've got to punish the bad guy. at the
Right,
end.
and then it has the completely extremely unsubtle shot of the rat going across the window.
Yeah, that
Which
was
I
like,
read was
why
completely-
even- yeah, that's
That was
not
completely
necessary.
CG rat, by the way. I did read it wasn't even a real rat.
So the boots on the moon thing is just that ridiculous manner
I
in
missed-
which
yeah.
they reintroduce Mark Wahlberg's character at the very end, because now that DiCaprio's character is dead, so there's another face-off very similar to Infernal Affairs in the elevator, where there's the second mole that even Damon didn't know about, takes out DiCaprio, and then Damon kills him. And that's actually a pretty good scene because it's all one shot. But then you go through the funeral, and then the girlfriend, played by Vera
Vermiglia? What was her name? Yeah.
Maddie.
Madeline.
So Maddie is pregnant with, we assume, Damon's child. Could be DiCaprio's.
It might
It's
be
up to him,
Billy's.
too. But her character is a combination of the two women from
Right.
Infernal Affairs.
And it's actually her character actually really annoys me because they do this fake thing where they make a stab at making her three-dimensional by giving her like a profession, but then in the end she's really just a supportive girlfriend to two characters.
Yeah.
It's not really a three-dimensional character, and like that kind of thing frustrates me. Like in the two characters in Infernal Affairs, like where a psychiatrist is clearly there to who plays a certain role. She's not there to play his girlfriend. She's there to do exactly that, right? To be someone he talks to. That's a character. But then when you make her like, Billy keeps like, I can only trust you. And, he's coming to her and giving her like basically all of his emotional burden. And then they have an affair. And then she is like supportive girlfriend to Sullivan, who's a dick to her half the time. I don't know, her like something about her character frustrated me even more in this than the characters do in Infernal Affairs. I think maybe because in Infernal Affairs they don't try to pretend that the characters are more than they are.
They are.
But she leaves him, Damon's character, at the end.
Yeah.
At DiCaprio's funeral.
Mm-hmm.
And you assume that that's done. And he goes back home. And even the neighbors hate him at this point. The neighbors are hissing at him in the elevator.
But why?
Yeah, I know. When he tries to pet their dog, it's like, you're the turncoat, you're the rat. How would the neighbors know that? So
Right.
he goes back into his apartment, and then you see the close-up of the moon boots, which Mark Wahlberg is made up, so he's dressed so he is not going to leave any evidence that he's been in Damon's apartment. So it's almost like he's in a spacesuit jumping across the moon, across the
I gotta go watch it. I gotta watch it now. Like American Psycho.
But yeah, there's so many things about this movie I think that are just excessive and unnecessary, and I didn't like anybody, and I got tired, and
Now, not that we care, but was, again, going back to Wahlberg's character. After Martin Sheen is thrown off the roof, and then he learns that he has to report to Alec Baldwin. He walks out, and Baldwin yells after him, 2 weeks pay, like he's on leave. But Wahlberg is saying that he resigned. So is he a cop or isn't he at the end of the movie?
Who knows? Who cares?
Does anybody care? I mean,
I did. I want to know.
Jim wanted closure.
It really bugs me, though, that people are like, this is a great epic tragedy. Like, literally anything good about this movie was copied from Infernal Affairs.
But again, if you don't know, if you're unaware, then
this goes to the heart of this whole series, right? Because why would you remake something if you're not really bringing something fresh to it? Like,
correct.
is it just so that it can be in English? Like,
it
for American audience?
It does seem that way by a large extent, yeah. It's like, oh, look, it was popular over there. So we're going to just take that and adapt it. So let me ask you this, because I don't think it works the opposite. It's not like really American movies are being remade by foreign studios. They just show the American version.
Yeah.
It may be dubbed and maybe subtitled, but
right.
They're not remaking our stuff. I think, like you said, it goes back to the dumbing down of the audience.
Well, I think to a certain extent, like, it's changing now. I mean, like, the fact that Parasite won the Academy Award shows that it's changing to some degree, slowly, maybe very slowly, things are starting to shift.
And
but
you might see a backlash next year, which is, we don't want foreign films to be Best Picture.
There's long been this reluctance in the U.S. to watch foreign films. In general, it's seen as like a niche thing, like some kind of art house thing.
Well, I mean, up until probably the last 20 years, you didn't really have access to this stuff. I mean,
you had to look for it.
When you went to the Blockbuster, the foreign section was always in the back right-hand corner. It wasn't up front.
And guess where I always was?
Basically, right? Yeah. I mean, but you're a rare animal.
Yeah, but that's the reason that's the reason that a Scorsese and other directors can take advantage, because they know that American audiences haven't seen this stuff.
Right.
So they can kind of pawn it off as original material, and then in the fine print, based on Infernal Affairs.
Yeah, and they're going to get some foreign market because of the notoriety of the movie that they're remaking.
While on the other hand, the American movies are pushed so heavily into foreign markets, there's no need to remake those because everybody's seen it already.
Right.
Right. In fact, even in Infernal Affairs, when he's walking through the movie theater,
Men in Black too.
Him, right? Men in Black.
Yep, Men in Black too.
Yep. That leaves a question, because that scene is also done not shot for shot, but it's done in The Depahted as well, the movie theater scene.
Yeah, except that it's a
and Jack Nicholson
theater.
Is that supposed to be his own
no, that looks
anatomy?
Like a dildo.
Or because
that looks like a dildo.
that was unnecessary.
It's also unnecessary that they're in a porn film. Like, why do they have to be in a porn film?
Right.
And it turns out that it was Nicholson's theater. That was, he owned the porno theater.
I'm glad I stopped watching this.
There's so many things where you're just like, why did they even make this choice? I feel like, really, honestly, like, strangely well qualified to speak to the idea of, like, going back to original material, because I've written a few books that are based on
that is true.
Existing material.
Right.
And one of the things that I'm always thinking about when I go back to this stuff is, what can I bring that's not already present? I don't think that it's my job to give you something that you expect from a story, an existing story. When I'm writing a story that's based on existing material, I'm trying to think about how I can make it mine. And it frustrates me so much to see American remakes of foreign films where they're not, like I said, not necessarily bringing anything new to the table. There's very few examples where there's something, you know, kind of unique brought by a foreign remake. So I'm struggling to think of one. Maybe Magnificent Seven, you know, as a remake of Seven Samurai. But
Right.
Magnificent Seven completely lacks, again, all the complexity in Seven Samurai. So, you know, we talked about the infuriating existence of Fistful of Dollars when you compare it to Yojimbo. But because Fistful of Dollars is in English, most Americans have seen that and have no idea that Yojimbo even exists.
So what kind of buckets, Jeff, can you even be qualified to give buckets?
I probably am not
Depahted?
qualified. No, I'm gonna remain bucketless this week. Because I can't give you an honest without seeing the entire thing.
Yeah.
It's unfair to the system.
The system that we work so very hard on.
I know. Let's go popcorn buckets. Genius. We're in.
I'm going 2, and I know that's high, but I like DiCaprio. So there were some redeeming things in this for me. I didn't think it was all trash, but nowhere near the ballpark of Infernal Affairs.
Mm-mm. Yeah, I mean, like I said, I'm not usually a fan of DiCaprio, and I did not hate him in this.
That's a screaming endorsement.
Yeah. I mean, he's really the only thing that's working on any level. 1.5 for DiCaprio. Yeah, I really, and it's just so long.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so long. You know, I don't understand why so many American movies have to be so long.
Epics. Yeah, it's like the self-importance to make a movie. For you to assume that an audience has the time or is willing to sit there for 2.5 hours.
It's like, well, if I'm going to pay $13 for something to sit there, I don't want it to be 90 minutes. If it's 2 hours, I feel like I'm getting my money's worth, even though that extra half hour is crap. So even though I just announced that I did not watch this complete movie, I do have to. I need to validate my nerd creds, which is at the very beginning when Frank first meets the kid in the soda shop there. He hands him a comic book, and that was number 11 Wolverine. Came out in 1989.
I saw that.
And then later, there's a fight in the same store, and the comic book rack gets knocked over. And I'm like, does Scorsese have an issue against comic books? Like, what is this violence?
And of course, like in any other Scorsese movie, it's got Gimme Shelter by the Rolling Stones. So he's got to use that classic rock soundtrack. So that's usually a hallmark of his as well. And it was overdone here.
Well, I can't hear that Creedence Clearwater song without thinking of Twilight Zone the movie.
It's true.
Right?
It's true.
It's a midnight special.
That was actually in a movie that I just watched last night, In the Tall Grass on Netflix, which is a horror movie.
Okay.
And when they played it over the closing credits, I'm like, that's the Twilight Zone song.
I know,
you
right?
Can't use that
it's
again.
so synonymous with that end scene with what's his name, Dan Aykroyd.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
The only other thing I wanted to point out, which is the fact that this was produced by a company called Plan B, which is Brad Pitt and Jennifer Aniston's. Well, it was when they were married.
When they were married, yes.
When they were married.
Brad Pitt was going to play the Matt Damon role, but he thought he was too old. So they got a younger actor.
Old. I think it would have been too likable.
If you've ever seen California, he plays a serial killer.
Yeah, he does play a real D-bag. So I also read that most of this was shot in New York. It wasn't even shot in Boston. I think they only filmed for like 3 weeks there.
For tax purposes, it was shot in New York, not Bahston.
So the only thing they brought with them is the accent. Everything else was in New York.
Oh, how
they'd say cut.
Upon learning that, how mad would Boston?
I think they actually changed their taxing structure to allow for more. They gave more incentives for studios to come. Yeah, because your whole movie is like based in this. You know, you're celebrating Boston, shot in Georgia.
That's what you. That's
you know
what
I'm
you
saying?
should.
Like
that's what you should have called it. It shouldn't be the Depahted. It should have just been Bahston.
Bahston cannons. 238 times the F-bomb was dropped.
Woo.
We were talking about being superfluous. That's
And it's not just the F-bomb. The C word is dropped liberally.
well, that
in this
right,
movie
but
as
I mean,
well.
so just add on all the other body language going on. There was
Right. That brings us to our confessional.
Confessionals.
Because The Departed has some daddy issues going on.
Among other things.
Damon's character often refers to Nicholson's character as Dad as a cover, but still he is a very fatherly figure in a very twisted way.
Okay, follow that, because in Infernal Affairs, when you're first introduced to Sam and he's on the phone with Yen, I thought he called him Dad. And I actually put in my notes, is this guy his dad? So I think that was true in the source material as well.
So our confessional this week, we wanted to tie in that father theme, and because we're coming up on Father's Day here.
It is.
On TMI.
Wow.
So we wanted to reflect on our own qualifications as fathers and as mothers. In Christina's case, were we ever inappropriate as fathers? Did we ever introduce our children to something that maybe we shouldn't have? You know, it wouldn't be the mob lifestyle.
Yeah.
What, in terms of pop culture, what have we exposed our kids to? And that's a very slippery slope, that whole sentence right there.
Right.
In terms of pop culture,
yes.
what have we exposed our kids to? Something that maybe we shouldn't have at that particular stage in their development.
Well, your children are much younger than mine. But I want to reverse this for 1 second, because my dad was not really a pop culture guy. I don't have the shared experiences that you do with your father, taking you to the movies and
right.
You know, exposing you to stuff. But there's three that immediately came to my mind. First of all, I was forced to watch Hee Haw, which I absolutely despised as a kid. But now I appreciate it. Like, if I'm flipping channels and I happen across it, I know the stupid songs. You know, it just it seeps into your subconscious, and whether you care it or not, eventually it just becomes a part of you. But my dad did take my brother and I to go see The Empire Strikes Back, which was huge. But more importantly, he took us to go see Caddyshack. Now, This movie came out in 1980, so I'm assuming that it was a summer movie. So I would have been all of 13 years old. And even though you look now and it's very tepid, but as a 13-year-old, there was some racy things going on there. And I'm sure that I chuckled when I probably didn't understand, because my dad laughed at it. But Caddyshack was one of those that I can look back and be like, wow, Dad, you pulled that one out of the... I guess he just wanted to see it really bad.
He just wanted to see it, right? And
I apparently, that was the case. But as a father... I've gone on record on this show numerous times that I am to blame for exposing my oldest child to numerous salacious movies. We actually had a name for it, which was Inappropriate Movie Night. And it was always when my wife was away, and I would let Skylar pick a movie. Well, it started out with anime.
Now, wait, did your wife know about Inappropriate Movie
Well,
Night?
yes, because we did know about it. She did know about it and was not happy about it. And it came to a head when one night, now Skylar was probably all of 13. So for years, I was so sensitive around my kids. I never swore. Everything was son of a monkey or oh Christmas. And I feel like once my oldest reached 13 years old, the filter just came off. It was like, oh, you're a teenager now. Screw this. F that. You know, it really was kind of like a dam broke open. But we would watch all these anime movies, including Akira, which I now know was very heavy-handed for an animated movie. Heathers was another one.
Okay.
That we watched. But we were watching, and I let her pick it, which was Tropic Thunder, which we will talk about one day because it is brilliant in and of itself. And my wife came home right at the moment when Jack Black's character was going through withdrawal because he was a coke addict, and they had him tied to the side of a Brahma bull, and he is offering up fellatio in exchange for a hit. And my wife went up one side of me and down the other. What are you watching with her? And all I could say was, what were you doing at 13 years old? you were probably in your friend's house in the basement watching HBO, and it was probably something that you knew your parents didn't care about.
Yeah.
I'm not plopping my kid down in front of this TV and walking away. We are having a shared experience together. And yes, I do, as a grown adult, look back and said, yeah, that probably was a little too young for that movie. Again, it was something that we did that was, outside of the realm of mommy. And to this day, every now and again, Skylar will bring up, how old was I when we saw this movie? And I'm like, way too young. But so yeah, I'm very guilty of sharing things with my kids, especially my oldest, that probably they were not ready for.
But they are none the worse for it, right?
I hope not. I don't know.
Yeah, well, it's too early to say. It is
the therapist
too early
doesn't seem to think that it was.
But we can talk on ourselves. You were not scarred by your viewing of Caddyshack, I'm sure.
No, not at all.
So I've got a few. My dad, I've shared before, and as Jeff has alluded to, my dad was very much into pop culture and took me to a lot of movies, starting, I think, from Snow White was the first one we saw in the theater back 75 when I was 4 years old. We'd go to the drive-in all the time. We saw all the major blockbusters of the era from between 75 and probably 85 until that's when I started going alone or with friends. And he was always very protective thinking about it. We never saw an R-rated movie. It was always stuff on the level of Star Wars, Empire, Indiana Jones, like that. Indiana Jones and Temple of Doom was maybe the
Well, I was going to say, even you look back in some of the PG movies that we saw are Back to the Future is laced with profanity. But
it's true.
But you don't really realize it until you start comparing it to PG movies of today.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh.
Profanity, I think, is a much bigger deal today than it was then. It was more about the violence and the nudity than.
Well, I was going to say, and I think that by and large, and I've probably said this a couple times, which is we seem to be much more lenient in letting kids watch violent movies as opposed to, God forbid, they see anything sexual.
They can't handle this. They can't handle this.
Right, correct. But meanwhile, that guy shot him right in the head. That was awesome.
So, and it went to the point where he knew that I was obsessed with Alien without seeing it. I had the Alan Dean Foster novelization. I had every issue of Fantastic Films, Starlog, the Famous Monsters that had Alien on the cover, but he would not let me see it. I couldn't even watch it when it was on HBO. I had to wait until it was on ABC before I was able to watch it.
So he was trusting the network censors to basically cut out all the bad parts that were going to scar you.
True. That was probably, Alien came out when I was about 8 years old. So that was when I was younger. So it was understandable that he wouldn't want me to see that. But it was a game changer once I entered into my teen years, just like you were saying. That's when he started to give me all of his Stephen King books.
That's a gateway drug.
So now those are pretty intense.
So, Pet Sematary,
it's hard to say.
Down.
I don't know what the first one was.
You don't remember which one?
My favorite was Christine. I can tell you that.
Okay.
That was my absolute favorite of his books, and that's why I was so heartbroken. That may have been the first R-rated movie I saw with him.
Oh, so Christine. When you saw the movie, you were heartbroken.
Because the movie is just such a cheat.
Oh,
you've read that
such
book.
A letdown. Yeah,
Arnie. But yeah, we'll get that's for another discussion.
How come no one ever remade that?
I know.
Right? Go back
and
to
it was
the source
Carpenter
material.
too. It was Carpenter. But I think the first thing that he showed me, barring Christine, that was pretty inappropriate was Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
That's
that. Now, I was probably 13 when he got that. I think what he was thinking was, like, maybe I had said something that Nightmare on Elm Street was, like, the worst thing I'd ever seen because I had seen that on HBO. He's like, I'll show you something.
Challenge accepted?
Yeah. He's like,
nice
watch
play,
this.
Dad. Nice play.
Now, that's more disturbing than anything else, that movie.
Right.
It's not really bloody. There's not.
No.
Remember any
matter.
profanity.
You got a guy
There's
chasing you with a chainsaw?
But it is scarring, and so that movie has stuck with me to this day, and it's hard for me to watch it now. So I would say that in terms of me. But for my kid, who is 9 right now, he's not at the age yet where I'm comfortable showing him like an R-rated movie. Although what I have shown him, and I cringe, I think daily, because we watch 2 or 3 episodes a day on Disney Plus, is The Simpsons.
which is so tame compared to some of the stuff that's out there. But
there are some episodes that tackle really adult themes, and I know that a lot of it goes over his head. But sometimes
you're aware of it.
Letting him watch this.
Yeah,
he loves it so much. I can't.
Yeah, my wife was very adamant that my son not watch Simpsons until his friends all started watching Family Guy. And I'm like,
which is 10 times worse.
Oh, it's horrible.
10 times worse.
Oh, horrible. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've watched, and I always watch it at night, 10:30 at night, but they do run it in the afternoons now. Yeah. It's like, it's a cartoon. Go ahead, kids. You watch it. It's not DuckTales. It's Family Guy.
So, I'm guilty just as much as anybody else is with my son.
That's pretty tame, though. Yeah. Well, but again, at 9, when do you think the gloves come off? When do you think that you're like, because I know that there's like movies where you're like, I really want to show them Toy Story, but I need to, the emotional connection. You need to get to a certain level and age range. And then it's like, all right, now he's going to be 10. Maybe I can step it up and start showing him X, Y, or Z. Like, what are the movies that you really can't wait to share with him? Yeah,
well, he just watched, because it's more of like an emotional maturity level that he's at.
That's what I'm getting at. Right.
So, and I want him to appreciate what I'm showing him. I don't want him to, like, for example, I tried to show him E.T. like 3 or 4 years ago.
Yeah.
And he was, as soon as E.T. dies, he doesn't really die, but he appears to die at the end of the movie when the government guys get him and he's all pale.
Yeah,
and
he's pale, yeah.
He didn't want to watch it after that. He's
Dude,
like, I can't
my
watch
sister
this.
was so traumatized. She was 4 years old. My mom took us to the theater, the whole family. And my sister, to this day, not only will not watch it, doesn't like talking about it, she will not share it with her kids. So that's going to fall on Uncle Jeff. So but I can't watch it. I can't watch the last 2 minutes of that movie without bawling like a baby.
So
and I was probably 14 when I saw it.
It was a valuable lesson that, I really have to think about, is he ready for whatever movie? Even though I may have watched it at his age, he's a different person.
And there's also movies that you don't realize are scary, because I will bring up 2, Iron Giant and Monsters, Inc., which are 2 very innocuous movies, but both of those movies, like, there's 2 scenes that scared the crap out of my daughter. One of them is Iron Giant when Hogarth first encounters him at the power station, and he's hiding behind the trees, and he comes out, and all you see is his glowing red eyes. Every time that scene was on, my child would run to the top of the stairs, wait for him to come out of the bushes, basically, and then she would come back downstairs. And the opening of Monsters, Inc., when they're doing the scare tactics, when it's like the scenarios classroom.
Yes.
And he sneaks, always same thing, up to the top of the stairs, would sit there, wait for that scene to unfold, and then come back downstairs. But you don't think that this is how this is how these kids are being affected.
Yeah.
And you're like, crap, I just scarred him.
Yeah. So, for example, next week's episode is going to entail us talking about Galaxy Quest.
Yes.
And my son watched that with me for this viewing and loved it. And
yes.
So that's what you kind of live for as a parent that's into all
and
this.
that's funny, because you can watch that movie and just appreciate it for what it is, but if you have any Star Trek knowledge in your DNA, this movie operates on a completely different level.
Yeah.
And I'm sure he's probably not been exposed to any Star Trek, I would assume.
No, not at all.
Right.
But also going from there and talking about Jack Black, we showed him School of Rock the week after.
Okay, which is
I didn't even think of that as a possibility, but it came up on one of the streaming channels.
And that's a fun movie, and it's a very kid empowered movie.
Yes, and you love that aspect of it.
Spy Kids, I highly recommend. My kids, probably around that age, absolutely like devoured those 3 movies, and I think there's 4 now too, but the 4th was kind of like a reboot. Again, kid empowered movies. That I always try to, especially with my daughter, strong female leads. There's so much out there that you just want to you want them to just soak in it. And it's like, all right, I got to temper myself because you don't realize how these things are going to affect them one way or the other.
That's true.
I mean, my dad. No.
Yeah. See, my dad never really shared anything with me.
I mean, he we watched stuff together, but nothing age inappropriate.
Inappropriate.
She was that kind of dad.
Yeah, but I have to assume that as a parent who has a 13-year-old who you've now exposed to all kinds of, there has to have been a movie that you're like, you look back and you're like, maybe it was just a little too young for that one.
Well, I mean, I don't know. He was 12 when we took him to the movie theater to see The Thing,
Right.
but he was okay. I don't know. I feel like we've eased him in, and I'm always really cautious about content. And like, is he ready for this yet? Sometimes I won't let him watch things, not because they're not violent, or because they have sexual situations, but because they have adult themes.
Right.
Especially, when he was a little bit younger, I would say, oh no, you can't really can't watch that, because especially when they're younger kids, they have really black and white view of the world, and it's like he's not mentally prepared to watch something that's psychologically complex or has shades of gray or whatever.
So you're more astute as a parent than Jim and I were, because we exposed our kids to crap that we regret.
I don't think I've regretted anything. I mean, I feel like we've, in a general sense, kind of eased him in and always been. I still check the parent guide sometimes for things before I watch them with him. Like,
there was actually a Christian page I followed for quite a while.
I think it's the same one. It's called Common Sense.
Yeah, I think but it was great because it really broke down, like, is there drug references? Is there smoking references? Is there sexual references in this? And it was meant in the controlling factor, in the sense that here's what you're going to get involved in. If you want to take your kids, it spelled out everything that. Yeah,
and I learned that I haven't seen Big in a long time, but just looking through it, Big has an F-bomb in it. I didn't remember that.
I don't remember. I don't think I remember that either. But on IMDb, a lot of times there's parent guide for films. They'll talk about what's in, and they'll say if like there's if the thing they're referring to is a spoiler, so you don't click on it.
Right.
If you don't want to know.
Yep.
But I'm not saying like, "Ooh, I've been so awesome," but like he doesn't seem to have been traumatized thus far.
I mean, my child doesn't seem to be traumatized either.
But as we said,
smart.
It's too early to tell.
Maybe.
Like I said, the therapist is like, maybe you shouldn't have let them see that.
Maybe. Sometimes I feel like just talking it out with them can make a difference.
We've already showed our hand a little bit. We've revealed that we are talking next week about Galaxy Quest.
Yes, which is what I rewatched as opposed to finishing watching The Depahted. And my wife laughed at me. She's like, I said, I have to watch Galaxy Quest. She goes, you watch it every third day. She goes, you don't need to watch it to talk it. And I said, but I want to. And this, I will say that this is almost a 5 bucket for me, because I just adore it.
Now, this was the first time I have ever seen it.
And I can't wait to get your reaction, because it is clever. It is very clever. And it was kind of underrated when it first came out. I think it's grown quite the cult status.
It wasn't a huge out-of-the-box hit when it first came out.
But it's a big stellar cast. It's a big name cast.
But it has, as the years have gone on, time has been very kind to it. It's a cult movie.
Yeah, to the point where they just came out with that documentary last year. Yeah. Just kind of cementing it in Never Give Up, Never Surrender is the name of the documentary. Right. If you could find it and you have any knowledge of this movie, then by all means, go check that out. And but what are we pairing it up with?
Along with it is Space Force.
Force, not Space Ghost.
No. Not Space Ghost. Space Force, which is the new Steve Carell, John Malkovich series that is on Netflix. Yeah. About a new branch, the armed forces, the U.S. military.
It's not made up by any means. It is a true. We'll get into this because it is a real entity. We now have a Space Force.
Yeah. So
I'm signing up. Are you going to sign up?
Yeah.
Because I want to be a space
Don't you
man.
have to go to space camp before you sign up for Space Force?
Which I think it used to be in Alabama. I actually knew, I think my music teacher's son went there to space camp. That was the height when the space shuttle was all over.
Yeah, I know.
Oh, geez, maybe I'm tipping my hand at the confessional. So, tune in next week.
Thanks for listening.
And I hope that wherever you are starting to come out of this COVID nightmare. Be careful. Take it slowly. Yes, thank you. Enjoy.
Thank you.
Ciao.
Bye.
Hello, everybody. If you liked the podcast you just heard, then please follow TMI on all of our social media outlets. First and foremost, email us at tmipodcast2018@gmail.com. That is tmipodcast2018@gmail.com.
And you can follow us on Twitter at TMI_podcast2018. Stop over, say hi, give us a compliment. We'd love to hear from you.
Awesome. Make sure you follow us on Instagram as well, which is also TMI_podcast2018.
And of course, we are on Facebook, facebook.com/TMI Podcast 2018. And it should be noted, we also have a community page, so join the forum.
And if you like to watch YouTube, you can see us at TMI Podcast 2018, all one word. Look for the popcorn bucket.
Popcorn bucket. Or you could just go to our website, which has every link there, TMIConfessionalspodcast.com. And we'll see you at the concession stand.
We'll save some popcorn for you.
I mean...
And, you know,
Bahston have